One good piece of advice comes from one of the characters in Silence of the Lambs. Believe me, you don't want Hannibal Lecter inside your head. Too little, too late. He's been inside a long time, I'm afraid. Good evening, Clarice. His voice, as robotic as Hal from Space Odyssey, inhuman and calculated, detached from human emotion, a true psychopath. Yet I can't deny, I identify. Many times in my life, I felt just as numb, deprived of all my emotions, repressed for so long. Never had I experienced real love, treating people like a psychopath. I've also imagined myself in Clarice's point of view, POV, unable to move, unable to breathe, masking her fears and emotions, feeling dead inside, like a slaughtered lamb. Years of training, proving her worth in a world dominated by men. Tough little cookie, but her eyes don't lie, staring into the slaughterhouse where the lambs await their fate. Like Clarice, I was also afraid and petrified. I watched as my father showed me his Hannibal side, taking his anger out on the sea lion, his arch enemy. Now I know I need to stop right here. I need to explain that, maybe I should explain that my father was a fisherman. And that animal stood between him and his catch. So he thought he had to be killed. On that deserted beach, no one stood up to him. He pounded and pounded wildly on an animal, had me wondering who was more of an animal. My father, a lion, defending his pride. Meanwhile, I couldn't move nor look away. It's like watching Silence of the Lambs. I didn't recognize this man standing before me, like in my nightmares, where I opened my mouth and no sound came out. I stood there as I witnessed the crime unfold. The sea lion pleading for mercy on the bloody shore. My father, too full of pride, showing his only son that once you start something, you sure damn finish it. You still wake up sometimes, don't you? You wake up in the dark and hear the screaming of the lambs. For years, I buried that awful scene deep in my memory bank. Never thought I had to make a withdrawal. Like Clarice hid that memory of the lambs, my brain knew instinctively to hide that from myself. I still love my dad, regardless of the crimes, regardless of the victims, every animal that dared to cross his path. A headless turkey bumping into the walls. Now there's another memory I hid for a while. I remember the chickens, the ducks, the rabbits, even Nena, my white rabbit. I was ashamed to admit it, but I lived with a murderer. I loved, yet also fear my dad. It's a Catholic thing. Incapable of feeling sorrow, remorse, or sympathy, I was convinced he had to have a switch. Once he would turn on and off, maybe all he saw was red, and he couldn't see the blood. I guess rage made him colorblind. Have the lambs stopped screaming? I don't know, Hannibal. The sea lion did stop screaming, lying there on that beach, like time washed them away. And for a long time, I started deep down in the back of my mind, archived as long as I needed. Why cover it now? Mom told me to beware of my dad. So I built a wall that he could not climb. Decades later, I realized I hadn't forgiven him. I felt sorry for every animal that found their end at his hands. I felt sorry for my mom, who was not happy by his side. I even felt sorry for my dad. When Mom and I left home, I was around 8 years old at the time. Seeing the light leave his eyes, his family slipped through his fingers. I felt sorry, but who felt sorry for me? Did I ever realize that it wasn't my fault? Did I ever stop blaming myself for their mistakes? Was I a mistake? Was I collateral damage? The lamb was still screaming in silence. My blood boiling, yet I kept it all inside. The trauma, the tears, the fears. See, Clarice would not have allowed Hannibal to see her weakness. Tough little cookie. Little by little, I became a shadow of myself. I had eaten my very own insides, like a cannibal, devouring my heart with fava beans and some Chianti. My brain on cruise control, even though I was not in control, never knew I was resentful, never knew I hated my father, never knew I hid so many skeletons in that closet. I almost forgot all about them until there were too many. No more room for skeletons in that closet. You guys remember that song from Rolling Stones, Sympathy for the Devil? Mm-hmm. Pleased to meet you. Hope you guess my name. Right? Ooh, ooh. I'll admit, I thought my father was the devil in the flesh. I cut him out of my life for good. I performed poetic voodoo. That's what poets do, you know, they do the poetic voodoo to erase him. And able to forgive his mistakes. I never expressed my feelings. He crossed too many boundaries. There were no redeeming qualities in my book. How could you overlook everything he had done? Until one day I realized the poison was killing me. Until I realized he was human, like me. It took me decades to finally succumb and tell him how he murdered the image I had of him. He was not a perfect man, but he was not a devil in the flesh. He was just broken. And he wasn't my job to amend. Forgiveness is for oneself. That lesson I had to learn. He's now open to listen. He's realized he's made some mistakes, just a few. He's no longer the wolf to my lamb. He's not the antagonist to my protagonist. He's not Hannibal. No, I'm my Clarice. Forgiving him is a daily practice. I now see redeeming qualities I refused to see before. Maybe he has changed. Or maybe I just forgiven him. All I know is that the lambs suddenly stopped screaming. Thank you, Clarice. Thank you.